What does Luke have to say about the authority of Jesus? Hello and welcome to Rooted Together Podcast, a podcast which aims to root you in Christ through his word together. I'm your host, Charles Hegwood, and today we are in Luke chapter 20, and we are talking about the authority of Jesus. You see, Luke chapter 20 is a collection of stories about Jesus's authority. Some are very well known, but they all go together and connect in their themes. We all must submit to the authority of Jesus because if you do not submit to the authority of Jesus, you will not live. That is your only hope and source of life is submitting to and living under Jesus's kingly authority. You see, in verse 1, it says, one day he was teaching the people and in the temple and proclaiming the good news. And the chief priests and the scribes with the elders came and said to him, tell us by what authority you are doing these things. And who is it who gave you this authority? Now, in some way, they may know the answer to that already, but they want to hear him say it so that they can trick him or trap him in blasphemy and have him arrested and ultimately killed, which Jesus will soon be talking to them about. Jesus hears the trick question. He understands it's a trick question. He understands this is not a genuine question of authority. They're not really just wanting to know the answer, they are disguising their true intent in a question that is outside of their intent. They are challenging Jesus's authority. And so Jesus says, I will ask you a question because he's not going to tell them directly where he gets his authority from. And he says, tell me, was the baptism of John from heaven or human origin? That sounds like a simple question of which they actually do know the answer, but because of the hardness of their hearts, they will not answer it. So, verse 5, they discuss it. Here's the reasons for not answering. If we say from heaven, then he will say, why don't you believe him? Because that would be the real answer that they should be giving. Well, it was from heaven, and therefore we are rejecting a God given thing, which ultimately is what they're doing by rejecting the authority of Jesus. And then they say, but if we say he is from human origin, or let's say rather John's baptism is of human origin, then all the people will stone us because they are convinced that John was a prophet, therefore it was heaven oriented authority to baptize. So they answered, they did not know its origin. Again, they know its origin, but they're going to settle with we don't know because they realize in their attempt to trap Jesus, Jesus has trapped them. And Jesus says to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. Now, Jesus is not trying to hide his source of authority, that he receives his authority from the Father, that he is himself full of authority because he himself created all things. Read John 1 1 through 5. But what he's doing is he knows they know the answer to that question. He won't answer it because they know the answer. And it's because of the hardness of their heart, they will not submit to his authority. Because here's the issue they answered it themselves with the question about John and his baptism. If we say from heaven, if we say Jesus' authority is from heaven, Jesus will then say, then why don't you believe me? And they know that's where he's going with that, and they refuse to let him do that. And so they answer with the hardness of their hearts, we don't know. So Jesus tells them a parable to drive home the point. It's in verses 9 and following, and it's a parable about a vineyard. And you have a vineyard owner who plants the vineyard, and he goes off and he puts tenants in charge, and those tenants will represent the leaders of Israel. And the vineyard owner will send servants back to get fruit from the vineyard, but they will beat and kill the servants. Those are the prophets. And by the way, the people Jesus is telling this parable to, the audience is the the Pharisees. They are the chief priests. They are the scribes. They understand his parable. It doesn't miss them. They get the point. And at the end of this parable, the vineyard owner sends his very son and they kill him, thinking they will receive the inheritance if they kill the son. And what they get is condemnation, judgment, and wrath. He says, what will the owner do when he comes to the vineyard? When he comes back, what will he do? They will be killed, destroyed. They know the answer to that. But when they heard this in verse 16, when they heard this, they said, that must never happen, the killing of the tenants. But he looked at them and said, then what is the meaning of this scripture? And he actually points some scripture out to them that they would know and be very familiar with. The stone that the builders rejected became or has become the cornerstone. Who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces, but whomever it falls, it will shatter him. He's saying to them, I'm the cornerstone. I'm the son that you are about to kill. By the way, in the background of this, they are plotting to destroy Jesus. And he tells them a parable that says, you're like those tenants. And all you're doing is you're looking at it and saying, how can we destroy him? How can we kill the son? And he says, what will happen to you when the Father returns? You'll be destroyed. They get it. And the last part of this little section, they understand it. But they do nothing because they fear the people. Again, the problem is Jesus has the ear of the people and the hearts of the people. Remember, they were just praising him in the last chapter as he entered Jerusalem. They won't touch him yet, but they need to trick him. This is the well-known passage I was referring to earlier. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give to God what is God's. They're going to try to trick Jesus by coming up with a question about taxes. Should we pay taxes to Caesar? Oh, if he says yes, then the people will not like him because he's saying they should pay their taxes to Rome. But if he says no, then he will draw the ire of Rome and get in trouble with them, and we're done with him. We don't need to worry about him anymore after that. That's their plan. But Jesus flips that on its head. In fact, he gives some paradigm shifting thoughts on that question we're going to talk about here in a second. You see, Jesus' authority, even when challenged, is absolute. And that's what we want to talk about with this, that Jesus' authority is absolute. His authority, as we're going to see in just a second, is like the air we breathe. If you accept his authority, you will live. If you reject his authority, just like you refuse to breathe, you will die. You may live for a short time, but you won't last long without air. You will not live long if you're not under the authority of Jesus. If you want an eternal, abundant life, you must submit to and fall down before our King. This is what Jesus will say as he answers their question about taxes. He says, give to Caesar's. I keep saying Caesar's. I'm sorry. Give to Caesar. I think a Little Caesar's pizza. Sometimes when I think about this passage, I don't know why. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. That means pay your taxes. He does tell the people, pay your taxes. By the way, it's good that we pay our taxes. There's no biblical precedent for avoiding taxes. But what he says next, that is what I'm talking about being paradigm shifting. That is what I'm talking about by his authority being like the air that we breathe. He says, give to God what is God's. And you want to connect that with what he says in the above verse in 24, show me the denarius, whose image and inscription does it have on it? And they say Caesar's. And he says, give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's and to God the things that are God's. One, we all bear God's image on us. So we are to give to God the things that are God's. Well, what is God's? Everything is God's. Our money, our resources, our very lives. Our hopes and our dreams belong to the one who created us, who stamped on us his image. And what that means, and the reason that is paradigm shifting here, is because it means that even when we are doing our taxes, and I know everyone hates tax season, everyone hates to see that money go out of their pocket to the government. But here's the thing, even when we pay our taxes, we are giving, even though we're giving it to the government, we are, by doing that, obeying God, because all things are God's, even laws, even governments. And therefore, when we obey the law, we are obeying God as well. Now, it's not sufficient that we only obey the law or man's law, but as long as it is a godly law, we obey God through obeying that law. Give to God the things that are God. Give everything to God. That's a theme throughout Luke. Look at the rich young ruler. Jesus says, give everything to follow me. Look at Zacchaeus, who gives everything to follow Jesus. And he says, give to God the things that are God's. And here's the issue, we may pay our taxes. By the way, the scribes, as much as they hated Rome, paid their taxes. They paid alms and they paid tithes. They did all of those things. The problem they had was they did not give to God the things that were God's. His authority is like the air around us, and they were rejecting that air, faces turning blue before the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. The next part, they're done. At the end of this, they became silent, amazed at his answer. What do you say to that? You don't. You go away. But his enemies are not done. The Sadducees show up with an ironic question. And the Sadducees, for context, are a group of leaders in Jerusalem who do not believe in the resurrection. But if you look at the section title here, it says the Sadducees and the resurrection. They're going to ask Jesus a pretty crazy hypothetical question about and concerning the resurrection, which they themselves do not believe in. That's why they're sad, you see. That's the joke anyway. But in reality, they believed in no resurrection, but they come to Jesus and say, here's a woman. She was married to a brother, and that man died, and this brother had 7 brothers, and they were married to all she was married to all 7. In the resurrection, whose wife will she be? It's a crazy hypothetical question. And Jesus answers it very plainly and simply, but then he turns it and makes it more. He does not leave it as a simple answer to the question, but he instead instructs them further. So, what does Jesus say? Well, he says to them, the children of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are counted worthy to take part in the age and in the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given to marriage. His answer is simple. Those in this age, they do marry and they're given in marriage, but in the age to come, and after the resurrection of the dead, after the dead and God are raised, there will be no more marriage. Marriage is the shadow. And when we're in the kingdom of light, we need not the shadow anymore. Marriage is great, but it is a shadow of what is to come. And therefore, in heaven, we would deduce that there is no marriage in heaven. So we will not have a wife in heaven. You will not have a husband in heaven. We will all be sons and daughters of God, and it will look different. Things will be different in heaven. And he answers that very simply. So on the surface, he answers his question or their question, but he does not stop there. He continues, and it's that continuance that, again, brings about his authority, that you must accept his authority to live. Because as he continues, but those who are counted worthy, which means some are not going to be counted worthy. Who were counted worthy? We'll find out it is those who accept his authority, those who follow after him. Because for they can no longer die. These are people who have been counted worthy. They can no longer die because they are like the angels and are children of God, since they are the children of the resurrection. Moses even indicated in the passage about the burning bush that the dead are raised, where he calls the Lord the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living, because all are living to him. He corrects their answer to their absurd hypothetical. He also then, in turn, corrects their misguided knowledge of the resurrection, saying, oh no, there will be a resurrection because God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. Therefore, those who are counted worthy will live forever in peace and in God's kingdom. They will be children of God. The alternative is that they will live eternally, but away from God, and that would be hell. It's a hard teaching, but it's there. The difference is who accepts the authority of Jesus and submits to it. The Sadducees do not. The Pharisees do not. The scribes do not. Some of the scribes answered, you have spoken well, and they no longer dared to ask him anything. They're done with asking Jesus questions. But Jesus isn't done with them. As we enter the last part of our chapter today, we're going to see that Jesus has an authority that is a kingly authority. He said to them, how can they say that the Christ is the son of David? For David himself says in the book of the Psalms, the Lord declared to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. David calls him Lord. How then can the Christ be his son? What is he saying? He's saying, I am the son of David. I am the king that has been promised. I am the one whom the King David, the great King David, looks to and says, you are my Lord. He's saying, my authority is a kingly authority. And then he ends the chapter by warning his disciples of the scribes and the Pharisees who give the appearance of righteousness, but really all they want is self indulgence. They want the accolades that go with and the honor that goes with self righteousness. And he says, what will they be? What will they have? What will they receive? They will receive a harsher judgment than most. What's the main idea as we wrap this up? Jesus' authority, as I said so many times in this chapter before, is like the air we breathe. If we accept his authority and submit to it, it's like the air we breathe into our lungs. We will live. But if we reject his authority, we do not accept his authority, it's like holding your breath and trying to go through life. You will not make it very far. You will be judged. The wrath of God will be on you. For Christians, if we are to give to God what is God's, that means we give our time, we give our energy, we give our very lives to the purpose of his kingdom because we are God's children and we have his image stamped on us. If you are not a believer, you still have the image of God stamped on you. And he's saying, you must give to me what is mine. He will come and he will collect. So if you're a Christian, submit anew today to the authority of Jesus. And if you're not, submit to him today and receive the joy of being a child of God. I'd like to thank you for joining me in Rooted Together. I look forward to joining you in chapter 21 next time. I'll see you there.